Great. Well, I just echo exactly what Matt said. I just want to share a little bit of just like appreciation for the connection that we've been able to develop with him and Logan. And we were connected through another pastor that is working with Safe Families to do just what happened, connect us from him being a pastor to other pastors that might be pastoring churches where there really is an interest and desire to intentionally care for those that our society still continues to overlook. So yeah, that's how we met back in December, I think. Yep. And we've just continued to dialogue, and they were like, we really just feel like we have a heart for this. And I know there were a couple slides that I was like, oh, I don't even need to talk about this because our missions so overlap and align with what you guys are already asking the Lord to equip you to live out in your own lives. And I think that was a cool connection point too, of like, oh wow, like there's a lot of intentionality in the words that your congregation has chosen and that Safe Families really embraces. So that's a little bit of how we met. I've shared this a couple times with a couple of you, but my family and I have been volunteers with Safe Families now for like 7-ish years. Our chapter here in we used to call ourselves the Cleveland chapter. We're trying to now say Northeast Ohio because we really do cover more than just like Cleveland proper. That chapter has been in existence for about 8 years, so we came on right at the beginning. We are a host family. We are a family friend. We support other volunteers in our church community in other ways. I'm a family coach, so we've done all the things, still do the things. And then I came on about 5 years ago as a staff person. So hopefully I'll be able, my desire is always to share from my own experience, but also to answer and ask some of those questions that are more technical and that I can hopefully help you guys understand, what it will actually look like and those kinds of things. So my hope for today is just to kind of share a little bit more of some of the foundational beliefs of who Safe Families is, talk a little bit more about the specific roles, and tell you kind of what does it look like here in Northeast Ohio. And then of course I want to have time for questions at the end, because I'm sure a lot of you are like, okay, like what does this actually look like? Or what if this happens? Or just those things that realistically we try to wrap our minds around. So that's kind of my desire and where I hope we'll go with it.
Right now, there are over 400,000 American kids in foster care. But did you know there are exponentially more with parents who desperately love their kids, who are perilously close to being swept up into the system? And the reason is they're alone and facing crisis.
It's just hard to even imagine that when you're in trouble and you look at your phone and you actually have nobody to call, there are a ton of people that are in that situation.
Safe Families exists to provide struggling families with love, community, and support before it becomes necessary for the state to step in and remove their children. Put another way, Safe Families exists to keep families together.
All throughout Scripture, when we look from the Old Testament all through the life of Christ in the early church, a common thing that was partnered with their worship was their love and care of their neighbor. And oftentimes their neighbor is one who is struggling, one who is vulnerable. You think of when Scripture talks about the orphan or the widow, they're talking about those who are vulnerable in our society, who don't have support, who don't have family, who don't have a community to love and to help them. Our call as Christians is to be that family for them. God has woven that in all throughout His story. We mobilize families in your church to come alongside these families who are struggling at their time of greatest need, to support a parent, to keep a kid safe, and to help keep a family unit together.
What's so cool about the Safe Families movement is that there are so many ways you and your church family can be involved in this community of love and healing. Host families take in children for short periods of time while their parents get back on their feet. Family friends provide support to families in need through mentoring and transportation, as well as to host families through babysitting and emotional support. Resource friends provide various types of goods and services to families in need to help parents get back on their feet. Think clothing and meals. Family coaches are trained to provide resources to families in crisis. They also ensure that the kids are well cared for in host family homes. And Safe Families churches are spiritual communities that bring safe families in as a ministry of their church to organize and unleash volunteers to serve their community.
God has designed us to live in community, and He has called us to live on mission. And He calls us to do that to those who are most vulnerable in society. Safe Families provides the opportunity for you to both live in community and live on mission, and be community for families who don't have the community that they need for their success and their health and their growth. So I just want to invite you, join our community and be community for a family who is in need. And you're going to see your life fulfilled as you live out your design and mission, and you're going to see a family's life changed.
Over here. Ah! You're too far away.
We can't see your silly face. Come over here.
Okay.
Make a silly face. Oh my goodness, that's so silly. You make your silly face. Oh my goodness, you guys are making the silliest faces.
So hopefully that can just kind of summarize a little bit from a big picture view of who we are. We're going to go into a lot more depth. See, this is why I was sweating doing this online, because I was like, am I pushing the right button? All right, so you guys definitely heard we desire to be an extended family-like support. These are the pieces that I know you guys live this, breathe this here. This is what really motivates us as our core values: radical hospitality, disruptive generosity, intentional compassion. I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time because I can't say it enough, like this is so intertwined in what you guys are already living out. But I will just hover here on this idea of radical hospitality because this is where it was interesting. We just had we have a quarterly all staff national meeting, and our CEO, Dave Anderson, who was featured in there, preached on this in our devotional time, and he was talking about that idea of being hospitable is a thing we all do. We invite our neighbor over, maybe your neighborhood has some sort of holiday parade or trick-or-treating or things like that. They're yeah. I build relationships, but this idea of being in a spot of radical hospitality is the dependence upon the Spirit to do it maybe when we don't want to, or do it in ways that stretch our time, stretch our schedule, or are uncomfortable. And so that's really what we're about, and I know what you guys are about too. I'm gonna kind of move past these because I don't need to teach you guys this. Okay, so you saw highlighted in the video there, why do we exist? I will say, I think our statistic for our chapter here in Northeast Ohio is in the high 70s of parents that report when they're reaching out for support, it's because of a lack of support, that they truly are living isolated. And that's where we desire to step in and be that person that they can call when they don't have someone to call. One thing I always like to mention here is it might not mean that they don't have family in the community or they don't have friends in the community, but a lot of times they're identifying those people maybe as not safe people that they would trust for their children to stay with, or if their family and friends are kind of living in similar circumstances or facing kind of some of the same challenges, they don't have the margin either to then welcome kids into their home or build an extended relationship with them in that capacity. So I do like to mention that because you might get to know a family along the way and you might hear them say oh yeah, my mom actually lives, a couple blocks over, and it might be wait, I thought it's not that there aren't people in their lives, but they're not available in the same way that I think you guys were mentioning maybe you have a family member watching your kids this morning, that those of us that have that healthy, safe network of families. So our objectives, of course, are number one, family support. We believe that the best place for kids to be is with their parents, if at all possible. So that is always our goal, is to support families to stay together and to keep families as best as we can and as best as they're able to keep them stable so that they're not kind of going through crisis after crisis. We desire to prevent child abuse and neglect. One big statistic that I constantly am always shocked struck by whenever I see is the amount, the child welfare system at large, when it was first created, it was really to address instances of sexual abuse towards children. That's like where it really initially started. But now almost 2/3 of kids that are actually in foster care are there more because of reasons connected to neglect than actual physical or sexual abuse. And so we've just like totally shifted what we see or identify as abuse and neglect. And then also so much of it isn't that parents are harming their children, it's that they are in spaces where they are maybe not able to access resources or not able to sustainably utilize the resources that they're accessing. So it's just, it's a broken system, as is our world at large. And so we really want to prevent kids from unnecessarily entering the foster care system. We do recognize we certainly in no way are anti-foster care or anti-Jobs and Family Services is the entity that exists here in the state of Ohio. We are not anti any of those places, but we recognize that there are a lot of families that don't need that involvement. They just need family around them. And so that is our goal. A couple things to note, we are not foster care. A lot of people, when you talk about it, and you yourself, as you were hearing about it, you might have thought like, oh, this kind of sounds a lot like foster care. The biggest difference is that it is totally voluntary. Parents are calling us. We have a helpline that parents can call directly. We have people in the community that are connected to us and are aware of us that might be then connected to a family that are referring parents to us. They might call on behalf of a parent, but it is always voluntary. So even if a caseworker or a social worker or the family's counselor, or even if they are already having involvement with Jobs and Family Services and they have a caseworker, even if they're saying, hey mom, we think you should call Safe Families, our question right at the beginning is like, is this something that you want to learn about? Are you interested in engaging with us and moving forward in the process? So it's always voluntary. Assistance is temporary. If you looked around at all on our national website, some of the numbers are a little different than what our trends tend to be here locally. When we're thinking temporary, our actual hosting length, so that would be times where kids are actually coming into homes of our volunteers, our hosting lengths are typically more a couple of days up to a couple of weeks. I can say in the 5 years that I have been on staff, the longest hosting I've seen was a little over a month, and that was a situation where a parent was going into a treatment program where we knew right at the beginning this is a 28-day program, and then she was transitioning to a sober living home, and then kiddos were coming back to her. Most often it's a couple of days to a couple of weeks. So our hostings do tend to be shorter than some of the national averages, which isn't good or bad, just different. Parents do not lose custody. You'll see on one of the slides there's a more technical term in the world of social work and foster care called reunification rate. Our reunification rate, and what that means is when kiddos are going back with their guardian. It's usually a parent, but sometimes we are working with grandparents or aunts or uncles that have custody of the kiddos, but our reunification rate is 100% over the past 3 years. Occasionally there are times where situations arise that kiddos we need to work with Jobs and Family Services because there is maybe more in the situation that is going on than we originally understood. But that is a huge thing. Parents are not losing custody. And then the biggest thing is we are totally volunteer driven. Our staff here local to Northeast Ohio is the equivalent of like 1.75. There's myself, and then I have one coworker. We have other chapters in Ohio, and we have a director at the state level that supervises all of our chapters in Ohio. But locally, we're a really small team because all of you guys are the ones that are out there doing the work on the ground with the families. And that's a huge distinction. And I have to tell you, I can't tell you how many times when parents call, well, how much is this going to cost? It's free. What? You know, like that is a game changer for so many families when they call, and such an opening to be able to then, as you're in relationship with them, explain why you want to do this. And that is where the opportunity to not only physically live out the gospel, but verbally be able to share with them of like what is motivating you comes in. So Safe Families Churches, I just want to talk a little bit about what that looks like, because we are in the process, it looks like by how many people are here, that this is going to be a partnership, and your church will be what we would consider a Safe Families Church. And we have talked about this specifically. There's no official contract that we sign or any sort of like official commitment of like, we're going to have this many volunteers. We really see ourselves more as wanting to be a vehicle for you to live out the way of being a disciple of Christ that you were called to do in this community of believers. So it does look like we want to see volunteers raised up within the church community. There's a lot of internal support that then gets to happen, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then it also can be a space then where, as different families are connecting with other families that they're meeting through Safe Families, your church community can then be a place that families are welcomed into. So that's what we really talk about when we talk about a Safe Families Church. Okay, I do want to show this video. This is Francis Chan. I don't know if you've read anything he's written or anytime he's talked. I just think he's just powerful. His messages are powerful. But this really talks about the role of the family. And I just want to share too, when we talk about this, and you'll hear me use that word family all the time, I think of a family, and Safe Families thinks of a family as a household. And that household looks very different. And even the current volunteers that we have right now, we have like my family. There's a husband and a wife and young kids. We have families that have kids in high school. We have families that have kids that are adults and maybe one or two at home still. We have couples that have no kids, aren't intending or hoping to have kids, or maybe are and aren't at that stage yet. We have individuals that are singles. We have retired couples that are grandparents whose kids are out of the home. We have everybody. And so I want you to know, when we talk about families, we're really thinking of the household, and we 100% embrace whatever that household looks like. And I hope too, as we talk about the roles more specifically, you can see how your household and your family might fit into it. It's not like a cookie cutter, one size fits all. We really want to invite everybody into the role of volunteering. So let's hear from Francis Chan here.
I'm pretty excited when I see the faith of some of the young people today that are just saying, God, I'll go anywhere. I'll do anything. There wasn't a lot of that when I grew up. But what happened with those who did have that spark and that excitement, I saw how the church almost squashed them. And I'm praying for this next generation, for the young people who are just saying, I'll go anywhere, I'll do anything, and they're doing it. They're going overseas, or they're, right where they're at in the inner cities or in their own suburbs, just going, I'm going to be radical. I'm going to follow Jesus completely. I want it all. I'm not about the games and about, okay, entertain me to death in the church. I want to follow Jesus, and I want to experience him. And I guess my challenge to the church is for those that are maybe my age, or those who even further along, it's like, would you set the example for the young people? Because what happened in my generation when we were younger, there were those who were radical, but there weren't people, once they got married, everything changed. Once they had kids, everything changed. And I'm just praying, oh God, could I be an example of someone who's married and has kids and is still thinking kingdom first? Like saying, like 1 Corinthians 7, those who are married should live as though they're not. There's a sense in which this mission is bigger, and can we still live and take risks and still surrender our lives and say, you know what, it's me, my wife, my family, I want to demonstrate to them, you know what, look, when we follow Christ, yeah, that was a little scary, yeah, that might have been a little dangerous, yeah, that was not the, logical move to make, but God did call us that direction, and let's head that way. And I want my kids to experience what it looks like when we live by faith. But not only that, I want to be an example to the young people to say, you know what, your mission with the Lord doesn't end when you get married and suddenly, oh, well, you're dating, so focus on each other, and oh, it's your first year of marriage, just focus on each other, and oh, you just had a kid, you know what, then take time for that little kid, and until he goes to school, then you'll be free. But then once they're in school, it's like, oh, they're teenagers now. Just collect that family together and worry about yourselves. But then you're teaching them this mentality that, again, is not about going out in the harvest and being a worker. It's about, let's protect our family now. Now let's keep us safe. Let's find some gated community and, and keep them all in our house, away from all the bad people. And there's no excuse for that. That is not what, you can't find that in this book. It's about living for Him, and you're missing out. Not only are you missing out on life, but your children are missing out on life when you do that. That's why so many of the kids, when they turn 18, they just ditch God altogether, because they didn't see anything real in your life. They didn't see that adventure, and you didn't put yourself in positions where God had to come through, and then He comes through, and your whole family was going, wow, that was amazing. I am never going to leave that God. No, you just created a little bubble for yourself where... how was God even going to operate in that? And I don't know. I don't want to be negative. I don't want to sound negative. I just get sad, because I go, not only are you missing out on life, but we are turning away our children by the droves, because our lives are not the adventure that they see in Scripture, and they are not experiencing the Holy Spirit. They're experiencing like a Christian version of the American dream that's watered down, and we just make excuses for really idolizing our families rather than really putting Christ in the mission first.
Ooh, I've seen this video every time, and every time I'm always like, oh Lord, like you are speaking right at me, and I hear you. And so I share this just from the standpoint of wanting to encourage us to think outside of maybe, as you think about what your household looks like, or maybe like, okay, what will we have the capacity to do? And I certainly don't want to offer this as a challenge of like, we don't want you to say yes to something that creates stress or undue burden on your home. But like, just really truly thinking like, what am I holding out to the Lord? And maybe what am I holding on to in terms of, as I think about what does our family have capacity to do, or how could our family fit into this? That honestly, I will say the number one thing that I hear from families that have children talk about why it's been so valuable to be a volunteer with Safe Families is because of how it impacts their own kids. Because I will say personally, I can't find another opportunity where my kids are so directly involved by giving up their room maybe, or sharing their parents, or sharing their space, or just all of those different things. So I just would invite you to think about how can you fit into this, rather than maybe the disqualifier of like, well, I can't do that because XYZ, or I can't do that, but maybe just the posture of like holding it out of like, Lord, how would you ask me, how would you ask our household to be invited in? And then likewise, I would say, when you are matched with the family and the different volunteer roles, that parent being able to see how your household lives, that in of itself is just plain discipleship, because they are watching how you have changed the focus of your schedule, or how you have changed the definition of who could be around the table for dinner, or changed, we're willing to drive 20 minutes out of our way to pick you up, to do this thing together, just all those differences. So just an encouragement of both how you might see yourself fitting into it, and then also on the flip side, how others will be able to see your household living out the gospel tangibly. Whoops, sorry, Francis, we're not going to listen to you again. Okay. So I want to talk specifically now a little bit more about the roles, and I'm going to kind of give you just a glimpse of how it all fits together, and then I'm going to go through each one specifically, and I will pause after each role to kind of field any questions you might have about each of the role. So this is what we call the circle of support. Kind of cheesy, but when you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it's doing. And I'm going to share a real-time example of where we just saw this happen here just a couple weeks ago with a family that Safe Families was serving. So we had a mom that reached out. She has 6 kids. Her youngest kiddo was having a liver transplant, actually, and she needed help with care, actually just for 4 of them. The oldest one was able to stay with a good friend from school, and it's a son. He was going to be able to get to and from school with that family. But there were 4 kids that she needed care for. And so she actually had 2 host families in her circle of support, because there were 2 younger kids, ages 3 and 4, that went and stayed with one host family. And then there were 2 older kids, ages 12 and 13, that went and stayed with another host family. So that also means that each of those host families also had a family coach that was supporting the host family and then also linking back to the mom. So this circle was even a little bigger because there were 2 family coaches. The host family that had the 2 younger kiddos, when they came, this was when we were in those days of like the high was like 7 and 8 degrees. It was really, really cold. And there were some winter wear items that they needed. And so the parents in that host family reached out to their church community. It's a setup much like this, where there's a lot of volunteers in their church community. And so that would be people that have maybe become approved as family friends, and they were like, oh, hey, my kid just outgrew these snow boots. I'm happy to pass them on. We also have these 2 extra pairs of gloves. So it was opportunity that then other volunteers within the church were able to surround the host family in providing some tangible needs. That host family actually also has a work situation where dad works a pretty traditional 9-to-5 schedule. Mom is a nurse. So she has kind of like a floating schedule and works really long days. So there were days where we needed childcare for this 3 and 4-year-old. So we had other family friends, there were actually 3 of them in the church community with the way the schedules worked out, that stepped in and said, hey, on this day, I'll come to your house and watch the 3 and 4-year-old, because the host family's kids are school age, so they are going to school. And then on another day, that volunteer said, actually, I have my own kids at home. Can they come to my house and I'll watch them there? So it was, 2 host families, 2 family coaches, probably like 6 to 8 family friends by the time it was all said and done. Resource Friend is providing those tangible needs. So I say that to just illustrate, you as the volunteer that's connected to the family will never be alone. You will always have other people that are supporting you as you're carrying out your volunteer role. And likewise, the family that's supporting through that hosting not only had the tangible ability for their kids to be cared for, but met probably by the end of it, 10 people that are all in this one church community. Now, obviously got to know some better and have a more lasting depth connection with some a little bit more. But that is really where we desire to see, for the support side, but also the relational side, for us to operate with this circle of support mentality. And then you can kind of see how other things fit in here. Here's where you guys are as the volunteers and as the church community. But then there's other pieces. We have community partners. This family actually is moving and needs some new beds. So I was able to connect her with the Cleveland Furniture Bank. They're a partner that we refer to a lot. There were also some needs with one of the younger ones. We have a person that works at Help Me Grow that we've interacted with a lot. And so I said, hey, I'm going to refer this mom. I just want to give you a heads up to kind of make a warm handoff. So there's community partners that we as Safe Family staff then are building relationships with. The church as a whole, you can see with that example how they literally surrounded this mom and this family. They also put together kind of like a little gift basket, because they were like, what is she doing? Because when the transplant was done, but he was still going to be in the hospital for a little while, and it was like, how can we keep supporting the family? And so they decided mom said meals are going to be a challenge, and so they decided to buy a few gift cards to give to mom so that she could have opportunity to maybe order in a couple of nights to lessen that burden of meals. We have financial partners around the city. We receive some money from foundations like Cleveland Foundation, Community West Foundation. We have lots of small individual donors. That's a huge way that our ministry continues to run. And then we have a leadership council, kind of like a board that advises and guides us. So just want you to see, like, you are never alone in doing this. And I think if you ask any of our volunteers, they could tell you too, anytime they are volunteering in any sort of role, they know, oh, there's like 4 people that I can call in a second that would be able to say like, oh, yep, let me help with that, or yep, I can come and do this. And then of course the staff, we're always here for you as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk about each of the roles more specifically, and then I'll kind of pause and field questions. So the host family, that's the role of volunteers where kiddos are coming and staying in their home. To become a host family, you're going to complete background checks, and if you're like, yeah, I want to do this, you will get all of this in writing. So you do not have to memorize any of this. You will do background checks, you will submit references, we will do an in-person interview with you in your home, where we also do what we call our home safety assessment. We have a checklist of items. If any of you have worked as a foster family or connected with families that have been foster families, it's very comparable to that. And then also you will complete our Safe Families volunteer training. Host families, I know this was a question you and Logan had of like, okay, what does that look like in terms of like, does it always need to be a family that's like one parent's home, or like, what, you know, kind of what are some of the different dynamics? We have volunteers that are host families in all kinds of different stages of life. And part of that in-person interview we do with you is to really understand what's a good fit for your household. We have households where they maybe do have one parent that is home full time. So it is a little more like, actually, like, we're pretty flexible, we're pretty open. Okay, great, we note that, and we're aware of kind of that would be what the schedule would be for your family. We have other host families, myself one, where both parents work out of the home a lot during the week. So can we maybe fudge like one weekday? Like, yeah, we could probably work it out, but for the most part, we would need help during the week if we had younger kids, but we can host elementary age kids that are gonna go to school. We can host kiddos that maybe are already enrolled in daycare that we would be able to drop off and pick up from daycare, and we can definitely host on the weekends. And there are a lot of families there that are looking maybe more for ongoing support because of just the stressors of being a single parent, maybe other mental health issues that they're struggling with, that really are just saying like, I need a break. We can arrange that over a weekend and then work with a host family that has that kind of availability. So I want you to know that kind of the profile of what a host family could be looks very, very different. We also want to hear from you, what ages feel good? If you're parenting a 6-month-old, a 13-year-old might feel a little intimidating for you. It might not, but it might. So we ask you those questions. You know, what ages feel like a good fit for your household? What is your household set up for? Like, I know my youngest is now 7, and the last time we had like a 2, I think she was about 2 at the time, there were a lot of moments where I was like, oh, I forgot that was in that drawer. Or like, oh yes, like that cabinet now has, you know, like we're just out of that stage. So we want to hear from you, you know, what feels good. And we will then call with requests that really kind of match that profile that you help us create about what feels good for you. And again, it's a couple of days up to a couple of weeks. And when we call you, we'll usually, I just spit. We will usually have like a very specific, like, hey, this would start on Thursday and would end the following Friday. Or this would start Friday night and end with kids going back on Sunday night so that they're ready to go to school the next day or something like that. So there's always opportunity for you to know, like, okay, these are the specific dates, and it is okay to say like, actually, we can't. We are okay with that. In fact, we want you to say no when it's not a good fit, or if you know like, okay, we can, but on Thursday night, we had already bought tickets to this event. If you think back to that circle of support, we might right away say like, okay, cool. Let me reach out to one of the family friends in your community and see, could they babysit on Thursday night for that night that you already have tickets to go to the event? So we're gonna work with you right from the beginning to kind of have a plan in place so that you'll know what the time frame will be, and then we'll also know maybe what extra supports you would need. Okay, so let me field any questions anybody might have about the host family role. Yeah?
Do do you, if you sign up to be a host family and then like you're not hosting anybody, can you do some of the other ones?
Absolutely.
Be a
Yep.
host?
A lot of people do that. So I usually say if you think I might want to serve in any of those roles, it's not like like highest level in terms of like they get the gold star or something, but like in terms of the most requirements of training and home assessment, a host family requires the most. I say go ahead and just go through the approval for that, and then you're also already set up for all of the other roles. Yeah. And like the example I was giving of the family friend that cared for the kids the day that mom was, our host mom was working, because they had been approved all the way at a host family level so kids could come to their house, it made it easier for her to say yes to watching kids on that day. Yeah, great question. Yeah.
About how many families is Safe Families serving, like at any one time in North?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so it really changes week to week. So like present day right now, we don't have any hostings happening right this minute, but we have about 5, maybe, actually I'm gonna say 4 families that we are like talking with and making plans for. One is a mom who has a planned C-section at the end of March. One is a parent who's like thinking she might be evicted, and so we're kind of like so there's always like the technical term, referrals that we're interacting with. That's always happening. And then I would say it just ebbs and flows, like that hosting that I shared about. That was a 2-week hosting that also included 2 host families. So that was a lot of moving pieces. And so we might have something like that go, and then there kind of might be a quiet stretch for a little bit. And then like there's a mom at the end of March that we're probably gonna host for, so it kind of rolls. I would say just capacity-wise, in terms of our staff being able to monitor from a safety perspective and support, we would never be in a spot where we would want to have more than like 3 host families simultaneously. And that might be like they're serving, like these 2 families are serving 1 parent, but there were a lot of kiddos, so we kind of split them up just for safety reasons. Yeah, but it really does ebb and flow.
Another question?
Yeah, no, it's great. We want to answer them.
And then, okay, let me think.
Yeah. We'll come back to you. Go ahead.
You might have already alluded to this earlier, and I perhaps didn't catch it, but as far as contact between all of the volunteers and then the parent meeting assistants, is there always like a mediator so that
Great question.
the parent in need is not contacting the volunteers directly?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to go back to the circle of support here. Okay, so I will say most often, if you're a host family and you're hosting, you're going to be interacting with the family that we're supporting, or the family that's receiving support, probably on a daily basis, but it's more going to be because you're helping the kids stay connected to the parent. So you might be facilitating a FaceTime call, or you might be sending pictures like, hey, we're at the playground today, and then mom is texting back. And I say mom, dads are welcome to call Safe Families too. We actually are supporting a dad right now in a family-friend relationship, which is really cool. But in my 5 years of working for Safe Families, I have seen 2 dads that we've served. So that is just statistically how it plays out. Okay, so you're gonna be interacting with the family on a daily basis, but more as the vehicle to kind of connect parent and kids. The family coach is kind of that intermediary person. So let's say you're the host parent, and maybe you're just having a hard time finding something that the kiddo wants to eat. Maybe like the things that we ask those questions, like what are some of their favorite foods? What are things, because we want to give you that information, but maybe you're just like, oh gosh, I just really feel like I'm trying all these things and it just seems like he's not eating a lot. That would be something that you will talk to your family coach about. And then your family coach will talk to the parent about, because we do want to kind of allow you to like do the I'm caring for the kids, I'm meeting their needs, and if there's things that need to be worked out and get feedback on it, we'll have the family coach navigate that. You might talk to the host family though, like this happened with that hosting that I was just sharing about. One of the kiddos woke up with a fever. And so the host mom called the mom of the family we were supporting that day and said, hey, she woke up with a fever today. I would typically give Motrin, and we have paper and documentation that allow you to do this. I'd typically give my kiddo Motrin. Are you okay with that? But it's kind of like an opportunity to build that relationship. So there might be some times like that. Bigger things like sometimes we might supporting a family who is living in, staying at a homeless shelter and maybe looking for housing. You as the host family are not expected in any way to help mom figure out housing. That would be something where maybe at the staff level, we've maybe tried to link her with other resources. She might already have a caseworker through another agency. If you're connecting with mom on that, it's more just like, hey, I knew you mentioned you were gonna go look at a couple places. Did any of them pan out? We were praying for you. Like it's just gonna be more the relational piece.
Okay.
Is that helpful to know?
It is, yeah. I guess I'm thinking of also once everything's kind of said and done and years or months pass, is it discouraged
to stay in contact?
Yeah.
No, just the opposite. We would love you to stay in contact. Yeah, we would love you to stay in contact. And I will say it's about 50-50 with parents we serve. I'd say 50% of the parents we serve really kind of need the need met that they are asking about, and then not that they're like, never mind, I never want to see you Safe Families people anymore, but it's kind of like, okay, I had the support I needed and I'm good to move on. And then we have relationships. We actually have a family, we were just talking about this the other day at a staff level, who they're about to come upon the 2-year mark of being connected and still spend time together and do things together and stuff. So there's lots of the opportunity for that too. Yeah.
So my question goes sort of hand in hand with that. It says that it's temporary, so obviously there's like a time frame you're hosting and stuff. But that family friend, the church coach, those things, are those long term? And then I guess going along with what her question was, is that's encouraged. Obviously we want to build a relationship, and obviously it's a ministry, like the gospel. But is it encouraged, like say they end up needing another hosting, like do we redirect it, or do you say, hey, we can
Great questions.
Better probably to facilitate it through.
Great questions. Okay, I'm going to answer the first one, and then I'll do the second one. So the first one, I will say it is usually the host family that stays connected with a family over the long haul if it started as a hosting. I will tell you more about this in depth in a little bit when we talk about the family friend role, but some parents reach out to us just wanting a relational support. They don't need their kids cared for, but they're like, I'm alone in this and I just need somebody to walk through this season or this time. So in that case, it would be the family friend that stays connected. The family coach, I would say, not that they can't stay connected, but that wouldn't be the role that we would really be encouraging to like, hey, stay connected to the mom. Did I answer the first part? The other roles?
I think so.
Okay. And then the second part was about, if they need support again. We always want the parent to call back to our helpline. It is totally fine. Like, let's say you guys have built a relationship, you're connected with the parent, and you know, like, oh my gosh, this is coming up. Maybe they have a surgery that's coming up, or maybe one of their kiddos has something going on that the parent is going to need to be at the hospital for, or something like that. And you know it's happening. It is okay for you in that relationship to say, like, yeah, we want to support you in this, but hey, call back to the helpline and talk to whoever. It's different. There's only two of us, but we kind of take turns answering it. But call back and talk to them, because we would still want to keep it under the umbrella of Safe Families for both the liability insurance that covers volunteers and also just for safety monitoring. So it would be okay to say, like, yeah, we definitely want to help you with that, but hey, call that a helpline and they'll start the conversation around the specifics of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess, that would reinitiate all the resources, not just like
Yeah.
being on your shoulder.
Exactly. Now, if it's something like, I will say, like, it is very common, like maybe you just understand that maybe the family just moved and they're in need of like a couch or something. If like your relationship and your connection to others enables you to say like, oh, hey, like I know such and such person is like ready to pass on a couch because they just replaced it. We don't need to know about that at a staff level. Like just do it and help the family. So those kinds of pieces, like we would love for you to stay connected and meet needs in that way. And you don't have to call back to have the parent call back to the helpline for tangible things like that. Yeah, great. What is it?
Write it down.
Yeah, no, it's good.
I'm almost 40. Do you guys reach out to people in the area closest to them, or is it anywhere in Northeast?
Yeah, our goal is to try to match parents with families that are close. Sometimes that doesn't always happen. Like the hosting that I gave you guys the example of, the mom lives in Cleveland proper, over kind of in the Buckeye neighborhood. The host family that hosted the 2 older kiddos lives in Ohio City. So that was like great. They're like 10 minutes apart. But the family that had the availability to care for the 3 and 4-year-old lives in Wadsworth. That's not ideal, but that was what we could make happen. So sometimes like we aim for trying to have proximity. It doesn't always work out that way, but that would be something that when we call you with an opportunity, we'll say, hey, this family lives in blah, 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 blah. This is what's going on. These are the dates. Yeah.
So when a family becomes part of the Safe Families, do they automatically get each one of those pieces of the puzzle? Like they get their host family, family friend, like
yeah, I understand what you mean.
all of them
Yeah.
from the get-go, or do they just
Mostly. So I will say if we're hosting, they're always going to have a family coach, and they're always, of course, always going to have a host family to care for the kids. It is like 90% of the time there's probably going to be a family friend as well. It just might be circumstances. If a parent has reached out because they just want a family friend relationship, they will still always have a coach, but then they wouldn't have a host family. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. I will say anytime a parent reaches out to Safe Families, at minimum, they're always going to be connected with 2 volunteers. It just might be what that role is, might look different for each time.
do each of the volunteers get connected with each other?
Yes. So on the staff end, we kind of navigate all those moving pieces and set up because we will also call family coaches, because different family coaches like, oh, I'm going to be out of town that weekend, I can't do it, or that kind of thing. And then once we've identified who all those people are, we communicate with everybody, and then we have kind of this big email that goes out with like everybody's phone number, everybody's contact information. And then also, I think it's on the next slide actually. At the church level, there is somebody that we identify, or they say, hey, I'll be this, to be what we call a ministry lead. And they're kind of like the linking person in your church community. So when there is a hosting, or when there is a new family friend relationship starting, we can talk to them, and then they can also kind of like mobilize, like maybe you guys put together a meal train for the host family, or maybe there's going to be like a text thread with prayer requests that are going to be put together. So they kind of act like an internal linker too in the church community. Great questions. Okay, so the role of the family friend, it can be both someone that is supporting a hosting, like maybe providing that daytime childcare if it's needed. It can also be somebody that maybe is just saying like, hey, like I know you guys are gonna host this upcoming weekend. Can I come over on Saturday and bring you guys donuts from, what's the name of the bakery?
Right.
Yep, and like just hang out with you and be an encouragement, that kind of thing. So it's someone that's just kind of coming alongside to support. And then like I was touching on, we also get requests from families where they are just saying, I need that relational support. And so that is a role that if you're a person where you're like, I don't think I could do the hosting because of my lifestyle, because of my house setup or whatever, this is a role that 100% you could do, because then we're just linking you with a parent in an intentional friendship is really what it is. We set that up for a 6-month period, and we say we would like you to connect on a weekly basis, phone or text, and then aim for meeting in person once a month. We kind of front load and help with that initial connection. We usually try to get together and have a meal together. And then beyond that, we'll continue to coach and check in with both you as the family friend and the parent we're supporting. But it really is, it's not a structured relationship. There's not curriculum you go through. It would be like if you just think about maybe a friend that you have walked through a season that was maybe more challenging for them, the same way you probably like sent them a text where you're just like, hey, like the Lord brought you to mind this morning, I just want to say, hey. And then you're like, hey, could we catch up on Friday? Because I know such and such happened and I'd love to hear about it. So you schedule a time to maybe talk on the phone. And then maybe like a week or two later, you're like, hey, let's meet up because I haven't seen you in a while. Like, let's get together and see each other face to face. So there's opportunity to volunteer as a family friend and really just say, like, I want to do that social support and be that connection for a parent that's reaching out. So questions about the family friend. Oh, I didn't say, so they would do the same. The only thing that they don't have to do would be the home assessment if they're not ever thinking that they would want kiddos to come and be in their home. Because if you're going to meet up a parent, meet a parent somewhere, and the parent's going to bring their kids. If you have kids, you're going to bring your kids. That's cool. You can do that in a public space. You could even have that parent over to your house with their kids, even if you're a family friend, because the parent's going to be there. We don't need to have a home safety inspection if the parent's always going to be there with their kids. Does that make sense? But all the other pieces are the same of approval.
Did you say that they would babysit and stuff at times though? So if they're doing that,
if you want to do that, yeah, then you would need a home assessment. Yeah. And sometimes, like, I will say I have seen this happen where sometimes someone might say, I'm just looking for a family-friend relationship, and then down the road, it might actually be something comes up and they are looking for a hosting. We obviously want to keep them connected to the same volunteers as we can. So if you already have done the home assessment and maybe you're saying like, I don't know that I want to be available as a host family all the time, but I would consider it if it was like someone I had already built a relationship with and it was for this very specific thing. So that's where I do usually say like, just go ahead and like be approved at that highest level of, you know, with all the different steps, because you kind of never know what might come. Any other questions about this? Okay, family coach. So that's that person that's kind of the intermediary. We also do a lot of training with the family coach around our safety monitoring procedures. One thing that the family coach always does is within the first 48 hours of a hosting, they go out to the host family's home for, we call it just a home visit, but they're there to see where are the kids sleeping, talk with the host family about how's it going, like what are things that have been going well, what are things that are challenging. They want to talk and interact with the kids that are being hosted. Now, obviously, if it's a 1-year-old, you're not going to get a lot of like information to share back. But like with this 12 and 13-year-old girls, sisters that were hosted, the family coach was able to really kind of like pull them aside and talk to them one-on-one. And it's just another point of contact that we want the kids that are being hosted to have a touch point with, that the parent that we're supporting knows is another person that has eyes on their kid and is overseeing the safety of their kiddo, and then also a support for the host family. This is a role that does not require a ton of time. During a hosting, you're going to do 1 home visit per week. So if it's a hosting that's going to last 3 or 4 days, you're just going to visit once. And then otherwise, it really is just like texting, how's it going, anything specifically I can be praying for. They might call you if there's, I know I've called my family coach when I'm like, oh my goodness, like mom didn't mention to me that like he gets out of bed like 10 times a night. Like I need some help. Can you help me just talk through like what are some ideas I can do, you know, like for like a 3 or 4-year-old, like I didn't think about that and I was up like 10 times last night. Like, so it might just be troubleshooting, encouraging the host family. So it's not a huge time commitment, but a very integral piece of that whole circle of support. And you can be a host family, and then both, if it's a host family that has 2 adults, both adults could also be family coaches. 1 adult could be a family coach. I've seen a lot of ebb and flow too. Sometimes we have people that have been host families, and then maybe season of life has changed and they're like, but I still want to be a family coach, but we just can't host anymore right now. So there's lots of flexibility there around that role too. Any questions about this one? Okay, resource friend, we don't officially approve anybody as a resource friend. This is just somebody, if you think you want to do this, I imagine you're probably already doing it in your everyday life. You're just someone that's just saying hey, if someone in our church is hosting, we want to be signed up on that meal train, or we want to volunteer if they might need diapers, to bring them diapers, just so that you're saying hey, I'm going to help. We don't, some chapters do utilize this in different capacities. Here, we just have found that it works best if just within your own church community, you're kind of identifying who those people are. And you probably know, I know in my circle, there's one person that if I say I'm sick, she brings soup to my house. There are people that just do that. Okay, I did talk a little bit about this, but the ministry lead, so not only are they that person that's kind of linking to kind of help coordinate all the volunteers within your church community, they also then meet once a month with me. I keep hitting this, I apologize if it's gonna make a loud sound on the recording. We meet once a month, we meet virtually, happy to work around people's work schedule. It's really just kind of a touch point, so we can share hey, these are things that are happening in our chapter, or we have this training coming up, or we have this fundraiser coming up. Can you pray for us about this? And then we also want to hear about your church. Hey, what's going on? What can we be praying for that's happening in your local church? And what can we be praying for if there's maybe a big decision about something, that kind of thing. And then if we have new volunteers that are coming on, the ministry lead is kind of that touch point too, where I can say oh, hey, I got an application from so-and-so. And then the ministry lead is yay, I've been asking them, when are they going to apply? And just kind of a connection point too, to help people as they walk through the process. So that is a role. Usually this person is also a volunteer in some capacity, so that you're kind of connected to the work of what is happening with Safe Families in your church community. But it doesn't have to be. If you're I'm really passionate about this and I really, really want to do it, but I just don't see a way that any of the other roles might work out, but I could do this 100%. We will lovingly embrace you. But I'll say sometimes it is a little bit of an easier fit if you're also volunteering, just so you're kind of in that direct circle of support in a more intricate way. Any questions about this? Okay, we talked about this. I'll just highlight here the way it's worded. Partner with Safe Families to disciple volunteers to grow and sustain a ministry team. We really see what we're offering as just a vehicle for that. We don't want this to be extra programming, and I think Matt has understood and seen that. We don't want this to be an extra thing that the church has to do, but more just a way that you are already living out the convictions that you have. I already talked about that. I'm going to just give you a couple last pieces of just kind of what does it look like practically here in Northeast Ohio. Partnerships that we have partnerships, and when I say partnerships, again, we're not officially signing a contract with anybody, but we have known contacts that are referring to us, and likewise, we might refer back to them. In all the major hospital systems Clinic, UH, Metro, in the Akron area, we present annually to the social work team at Akron Children's. So we've got connections like that. We're always happy for new ones. So if you're wait, I know this social worker at so-and-so place, we'll always take that. But we're always intentionally, and that's our job as staff, to build out those relationships. The shelters in the area, we have a very flourishing partnership with City Mission, specifically Laura's Home. We work with moms there quite a bit. We have some connection with Central intake, which is the way Cuyahoga County navigates those that are needing a place to stay. So we have been able to present to their actual intake team before, so they're aware of us and know of us. So sometimes if someone's calling in and it's a family that has kids and it's a wait to get into a shelter, which sadly that is the reality here, like we don't have spaces that someone could just be in a shelter right away, they might call us and say, hey, we're working with this family, we're trying to get them into the shelter, but they've got 3 young kids, and right now like they don't have any place to stay, or they're staying in their car, or they're just staying at friends' houses, that kind of thing. Schools, I know just kind of as we've gone through the ministry growing, different schools hear about us and might ask like, hey, can we share with our social work team? Recovery programs, similar social services agencies like Beachbrook, Guidestone, those are all places that we have interactions with and have kind of touch points there. Journey Center, I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's an agency that provides support to people getting out of any sort of domestic violence situation. We have a contact there. So there's lots of places that people are referring to us and we're referring back. We serve families with children. We serve families that feel alone and don't have a healthy support system. These are some of the big things that families come to us with: facing homelessness, substance use, mental health, domestic violence, medical crisis, having a baby. That's a really huge one. We serve a lot of moms that are having a baby and need a place for their other children to be while they're at the hospital having their baby. All of our families are families that we are desiring to be that extended family-like support for. This piece, sometimes we can host parents and children. We have not delved into that here in Northeast Ohio. Other chapters are doing that, and not that it's a bad or a good thing. We just haven't, it hasn't been a need that has been brought to us yet. So we do say it is something that we could do, but we haven't faced that yet here. Yeah, the things that we offer to a family, I think the biggest thing is that family-like support. Some of these other pieces, the social connections, research shows us that, I mean, we know this because God tells us this in His Word. This is why He created us to be in relationship. But social science is catching up now, and the research supports this, that social connections are the #1 thing that change a person's feeling from being alone to feeling like they have community and the ability to tackle whatever is before them. And then, of course, things that I think are distinctions that we can offer to families that they might not receive in other agency situations where it's more transactional, is we are offering that piece of hospitality that is 100% relational. We offer connections to all those places that I was telling you we have relationships with. And then, of course, we have the opportunity to pray with parents. Honestly, sometimes when parents call the helpline, even if we're not able to serve them, we'll say like, hey, can I just pray with you right now? So that is just a tool that we offer all the time. Talked about this, the 2 different kinds of support: the family friendship, which is that relational piece, and then the hosting. And then these are the last 2 slides, just so you can kind of have a little glimpse of what it looks like here. This is what we reported out to our funders over the past year. So this would be the past calendar year. So we supported 30 families, and in those 30 families, there were 35 individual children that were served. There were 50 hostings. So if you do the math, that definitely means we host more than once. We see that as a real strength if a family is reaching back out to us or is staying connected with us and saying, I need help again, I need hosting for this reason. We had 50 individual hostings, and then we had 9 family friend relationships. So those would be those ongoing relational connections for that 6-month period that we described. Just a little bit of the demographics of the families that we served. 90% of the families we served last year are single parents. Around 73% said the reason why they needed the support was because of lack of support in their own life. All of the families that we serve are below the poverty line, living at or below the poverty line. And then, like I mentioned, 100% of the time, and that's actually true for us for 3 years, kiddos are going back to that legal guardian, parent, grandparent, whomever it was at the start of the hosting. And then this is a quote from a family that we have been connected to for a little while. So, gosh, I'm like getting choked up. I'm gonna just be real with you. My family was actually the host family that was paired with this mom, and they just are like really dear to me. So reading her words, I'm like, oh man, this hits hard. But she said, I was so terrified my children would end up in the system, and I didn't want that. My goal for my children was that they would stay together and out of foster care. The connection my family has built with the host family has helped us so much. I had ease, a sense of security. I felt and knew my children would be safe. And she gave us permission to use her name. Her name is Alexis, and she has 2 beautiful young daughters that my family still were connected to her and her kids still. So it's a cool story. And then just nationally, just so you can kind of get a glimpse of what we're doing. And Safe Families isn't just national, it's actually international. We actually just had an international prayer event this past week where we had staff from all around the world. There's a huge chapter in Hong Kong, all of the UK. They actually have tons of government funding that supports what Safe Families is doing in the UK, which I just think is so cool to see that like a country that we would say maybe like is dead in a lot of ways spiritually, like they see the value in what Safe Families is offering, and that is just so cool. But there's a chapter that just started in the Philippines. There's a huge network of chapters in Canada, so there's lots of work happening within Safe Families around the world. So just to kind of leave you with that on a national level. So next steps. I have contact information for all of you, so I will just send out a general like, thank you for coming, and I will embed in there a link to apply if you're like, okay, I think we want to do this. I'll tell you the application. The initial application is pretty quick. It's maybe like 7 or 8 minutes. It's just kind of asking who lives in your house, what's your address, what's your phone number. There's a couple open-ended questions of like what is moving you to want to volunteer. It won't take you long. We do ask you in that application to identify 3 references, so that might be something that you kind of want to think about and know before you complete that. But that would be a very easy next step that would get us connected more officially with you and with our Safe Family staff. And then beyond that, Matt and I will continue to talk, and with other leadership as well, as ideally what we'd love to do kind of on this timeline then is plan a time that we would have a volunteer training, whether it be on site here or in a space nearby, but that would be hosted by your church community. Sometimes we partner, if there's a couple churches in the area, we'll work out those details and get that information to you. We do also offer online training. It's broken into smaller modules, so you could sit down on a Tuesday night and watch an hour and a half, and then 2 nights later do the next section for 45 minutes or whatever. I really encourage people to try to do an in-person training. It's just a way that we get to know you better, you get to know us as staff better, and especially when it's like a church community with multiple people coming on, it's really cool to kind of do that together. But the online version is available. So next steps would be when I email you, respond. I love it when people respond, even if it's just a like, hey, it was lovely to meet you, thank you for coming, but I'm not sure what I want to do right now. Totally cool. I'll keep the ball going with the conversation of checking back in with you, but I'll give you some direct like, hey, if you know you want to apply, here's what you can do, and kind of point you in that direction to keep the conversation going. Any other questions you guys have? Yeah.
Do you apply as a household or?
Great question. Yeah, just as a household. And there's a spot on there that it will ask who else lives in your house. If there are other people in your house that maybe you're just saying, I want to be a family friend, but I know other people in my household maybe don't want to, like, could be a spouse, could be roommates, whomever, don't want to volunteer. If they're over 18, actually, I'm going down a different train of thought. If you're just volunteering for a family friend role where you would just be providing social support, they wouldn't have to do anything. If you were volunteering as a family friend that would maybe want to be able to do like a day hosting, we could call it, where you're offering that childcare, if they're over 18, we would need them to do fingerprinting as well. But if it's like a scenario where, and this happens, where maybe one spouse really feels called to do it and the other spouse is like, I'm not so sure, that's okay. Like the one spouse can come on and start as a family friend, and the other spouse can maybe join in later if they feel led. But yeah, we would need to just know who all's in the house, and that the application will prompt you to enter all that. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
So when a family is connected with a host family, do you try to connect the family friend within the same congregation?
Yes, we do. Yeah. It doesn't always work that way. I will say, and I know Matt has heard me talk about this, like where we really see that circle of support and where, like, I honestly will say, I think there's also sometimes a direct connection to how long the connection happens between the parent that has requested the support and the family, is where we really do have like a robust kind of pool of volunteers in a church, because it's just easier. Like you just see one another more. And also, like, if you were the family coach and then the host family invites that family to come to church, you as the family coach are like, hey, I remember, like, I talked to you last month and it's so good to see you. You know, it just is natural that more of that happens. But it is not a requirement that a volunteer has to be part of what we would call a Safe Families church. We're happy to receive volunteers, even if their church at large maybe isn't feeling the same calling. So there are instances where we then just kind of like try to do it by proximity. Yeah. And sometimes it's just availability. Like even if we walk away from here today and 10 of you guys come on as volunteers and 3 of you are family coaches, we might call all 3 of you as a family coach and you might not be available one weekend. So then we might have to utilize like a family coach from a different church community, and that's okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say something. I'm Lindsay.
I figured that was you. I've seen your picture when you walked in. I was like, I've seen her picture online. Yeah. Yeah, we did.
I just wanted to share with you
through the school. Yeah.
That I had heard about Safe Families through Networks at City Mission, and I work with families that I know would really benefit what you do. So I had reached out to you about families that I'm working with in Elyria and the Lorain area, and was so sad. But I realized like the furthest east there was for families was like Lakewood. It's like, oh, that's gonna be tough to get kids to school and things like that. And when we were talking, you were gonna send me pamphlets for families that I connect, and I was like, what about churches? Because I'm thinking this would be something our church could really get on board with. So she was sending me pamphlets that I was going to pass on to Matt and Logan, but I hadn't even talked to Logan about it because life, right? And then Logan comes home. He's like, Matt and I went to a Safe Family saying, this woman knew you.
It was really cool.
He walked up and she was like, oh, I talked to the social worker at Open Door. He's like, that's my...
Yeah. We were like...
And so it was just, that was a really cool thing, because I feel like it was like I was already going to present this to them, but God had already given it to them in a different way. And then like seeing all of you here, and not just the number, but like knowing all of you, and what I'm just like beside myself giddy. So cool. And also because I am so connected to so many families in need with what I do that are more or further west. That there's not a lot of resources this far west from Cleveland, that we could be that like middle ground of into Lorain County, you know, West Cuyahoga County. And I'm just like giddy excited about what God is doing. And I just love the model that you all give, that it's not just one family, but it's this whole wraparound approach. Because what it is, when you think about a family, and I just have several families in my mind that are just so isolated in their trauma and in their grief and what they're going through, and it's hard for me to imagine, because I have family and I have church family, and I like, if I need something, I've got like 25 people I could call that I know y'all would be there, and most people don't have, or a lot of people don't have that, and that's who you serve. And seeing that we can like just gospel wrap around people who have literally like don't have anybody, it just makes me so excited. I'm just like thrilled that we're doing
I'm glad you brought that up.
I feel like God just like has totally made this happen.
100%.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, Lindsay. I didn't know the full story.
Yeah. Like honestly, it was maybe just like a couple weeks before.
I hadn't received the pamphlets yet. Yeah. Because I was going to bring them to Matt and Logan.
Yeah.
And other churches. Not that way, but I was obviously just thinking about our church.
Yeah.
To start with, and then Logan was like, "Oh, do a Safe Families thing." I was like, It's like, oh my goodness, this is so funny.
So just bullet points from our previous conversation. There is comprehensive liability insurance provided through Safe Families.
100%.
Like you're completely covered. You don't have to worry about things like that.
Yeah.
There's no cost to you as far as I've got to pay into this. I got to support it financially. I mean, you're feeding the kids out of your own pocket and doing that, but you won't get remunerated or reimbursed for anything. But it's also no cost to you. Your background check, the church would cover all of that. And then with the county line, there's no goofy stuff with that.
No.
like, it's just not an issue because this isn't part of the legal process or anything like
Nope.
that. Is that all correct?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. Yeah, and none of our funding, like funding that we receive for any foundations to support us, none of that like stipulates like, oh, it can only go to families in this county. Ours is like just do the work of Safe Families is what our funding is for. Yeah, that's all true. I will say the only thing people sometimes have to buy, and it's very minimal, is if you don't have a carbon monoxide detector in your home. A lot of smoke detectors are now dual. I know our family didn't have one of those. Glad we do now. But when we first started to volunteer, so that might be a cost. And then we don't ask you don't have to buy a car seat or a gate for a doorway or any of that. That's where like we have things we can loan out within your own community. You'll be able to share out those things. We have car seats to loan out. We sometimes just borrow them from the family. You might want to consider buying, and we would talk about this when we come to do the home assessment. Every kiddo has different experiences with the ability to go in and out of the house. So our house, we have a couple of those things that go over the doorknob, the child protective covers. I don't know if you've seen those, because we have had kids before where it's like, oh, you're just about to walk out the back door right now, and like we're not ready for that. So like a couple of little things like that and those are all things that you could just like put on when you need them and then take off when you don't need them. We have like one for our cabinet under our sink where we keep cleaning products and dishwasher detergent and stuff, and it's not like a permanent fixed one. It's just one that we like snap on when we need it, and then when we don't have little kids that we need to be thoughtful about that, we can take it off. So that might be something that you end up buying, but those are minimal costs. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. That's great. And we'll give you information. We have a sheet that goes over what the liability coverage does, in fact, like the specifics of it. If you're a person that like wants to do that, we have that for you. And then the paperwork that you also sign with the parent, well, we sign with the parent and we give you a copy, allows you to have power of attorney for the days in which the kiddos are in your care. And that gives you permission to seek medical care for kiddos, give prescription medication, give non-prescription medication, like the example I was giving of like giving Motrin. And if it's a kiddo that's in school or daycare, it also allows you to pick up, drop off. We still work with the parent to make sure like the school knows who you are and you're on the emergency contact list, but you will have a copy of that legal document as well if anything were to arise. Yeah, and we've not ever had any issues with that. I don't want to say that to scare you, but we want you to also be equipped with what you need, so yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Let me just pray for us, and then you will hear from me via email, and we'll continue to talk, and I imagine we will see one another again soon. So let me just pray for us. Lord, I am just so thankful just for the opportunity to come and just see faces of those that are just responding to just the tenderness that you have already put on them and just wired into them of how they want to love people intentionally. Lord, I'm thankful for this church community as a whole, for the way that they are intentionally wanting to live out the gospel in the local community and intentionally seeking opportunities to do that. God, we just trust that whatever it may be that this partnership might look like will be something that we will celebrate, and just even hearing, it's Lindsay, right? Lindsay's heart of just seeing Safe Families reach, grow into Lorain County is something that I would love to see happen too. And we just trust you with that, Lord, and just ask that you will just give guidance to us as a whole, for all of us in this room, as to what our next steps would be and how you desire us to respond. Pray for our days as we interact with family, maybe do household errands, all those different things, just that we would do it from a posture of wanting to love you well and be intentional with the people that you are putting in our path today. And we pray these things in your name. Amen.